Geology is the foundation of successful implementation of the program of enhancing hydrocarbon production.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, dear colleagues, dear geologists. I'm very grateful to the Association of Geologists for invitation to this conference, and to Mr. Zagorodnyuk personally. Since I'm a representative of the biggest oil and gas production company in Ukraine, which produces more than 75% of natural gas in Ukraine, I will speak about the energy sector, about oil and gas production. The topic of my presentation is devoted to geology. And geology will be central part of my presentation about energy production sector. On this picture you see that in 1970s Укргазвидобування production was at the level of approximately 60 billion cubic meters annually. Now Ukraine consumes around 32-33 billion cubic meters of gas, including gas which is burned in course of transit. All those who are present in this room understand why the decline happened between 1970s and 1990s, when our production amount dropped to some 15 BCM annually, which figure remained in place up to recent period. We all understand what is behind these figures, but today I would like to focus on the components of success for each successful big production company. In the world, the profitability and capitalization and growing capitalization are seen as the major business goal for each production company, and the most successful company is allowed to reach this objective, these both objectives simultaneously. So competence and professional level of the employees and access to innovation and technologies are seen as the main contributors to this factor. My experience of 20 years working in gas production companies allowed me to add some more factors of success for a company. In this diagram you see 5 components which, being present in the production company and developing rapidly, allow company to develop successfully. The absence or lack even in one of these factors makes company vulnerable and most probably non-successful. This statement is based on my 20-year observations on the progress of companies working in the market. So, competences of the employees, organizational structure of management, stable financial source with a stable financial balance. That is, geological exploration work requires constant source of funding because this is very risky work. Continuous positive dynamics in the growth of new discoveries and resources. This is an important component for the company's profitability. That is, growth of production actually means the raise of cash resources of the company, then ability to stack with the international standards. Because it contributes to capitalization of the company, allowing the company to increase its production in future. And another important thing, which is quite often omitted by international companies coming to Ukraine, very strong compliance with the existing regulations. Currently, Ukraine only starts its process on harmonization of its regulations with the EU regulations. And much is to be done in this area. The law has to be implemented and enforced, and some international companies coming to Ukraine, they forget about this aspect. And one more comment. The key figure for any successful oil and gas production company is the project manager. This is a key figure without whom any production process would fail. This should be chief geologist, a good manager with a good geologist team. Geophysics, it's good. That's are like eyes of a geologist, but we should have a full team of experts. Then ability to choose amongst most prospective assets, geological support and assistance in each project. Exploration work. My experience with the Canadian and American companies suggests that they have all these stages in place, which might be called differently, but in essence they are the same. Then we have the exploration drilling and processing of exploration primary data, then calculation of reserves, which should be done very carefully and adequately, because improper assessment of reserves may result in future commercial losses or improper applications for special permits or licenses. So we have to understand the commercial viability of the projects. The next is simulation of the future fields, engineering works, drilling works, etc. Because we can have lots of discussions about potential reserves, about huge production potential, but all that remains simply words unless you have drilled at least one well. Then a strong team of geologists should accompany all the geology works and prevent all the threats to environment from our drilling work, and the compliance team or environmental protection team in a company should accompany all the geological works and signal in case of any threat to environment. Thus, each production company cannot exist without a geologist or environmental geologist. And now we come closer to Укргазвидобування itself. Probably heard about Strategy 2020 program. This is a set of targets aimed at energy independence of Ukraine, and the overall objective is to get rid of gas purchases from abroad. All of you might hear how people express their discontent when each autumn the dollar goes up in its exchange rate because we have to buy fuel for winter heating season. We have assessed that in the year 2020 we could reach production at the level of 27 BCM annually, and on the other extreme of this process, we should implement energy efficiency and thus become energy independent. On the path to this target, we already have some successes. In 2016, we produced 14 BCM, in 17, 15.2, and in the year 2018, 16 BCM a year. And we managed to enlarge production over our internal target annually. Now we are projecting for the year 2018 and thinking about the ways how this could be done. These are not just figures, these are not just targets. They bring in a serious work, especially for the team of geologists. That's why I'm very happy that today Association of Geologists awarded several our specialists who work hard on the increase in production, how to enlarge production to satisfy the target that was set for us by the government. This slide demonstrates, I am going in depth. This slides suggests how we can increase domestic production. The reserves amount to 614 trillion cubic meters, but quite often we forget that these are residual reserves of mature fields which are at the final stage of production. And the influx of gas and oil is small. At the same time, Ryder Scott Company carried out assessment of these reserves, and they have assessed explored reserves, extractable reserves at the level of 260 billion. This difference appears due to the difference in assessment systems. That is, they do not just consider volume indicators, they consider commercial indicators. They only study commercially viable projects. So they assess specific parameters of wells, drilled wells, while we tend to discuss how much gas could be found in some geological structure, but these are net reserves which could not probably be extracted. That's why
when the journalists are talking about trillions of cubic meters of gas in Ukraine, I can understand it. But when geologists say that in Ukraine we have trillions of cubic meters, I will argue, because we need to work hard, to work plenty of wells to turn these resources into reserves, because I believe these are resources but not reserves. But because we have the fields which are operating and there are residual reserves, first of all we develop the measures on reducing the rate of production. It is important for us to receive these volumes, but not in 50 years. When there are other sources of energy. We introduced the system of audit of wells, and in detail that is what the geologists forgot to do, to go to the archive, to analyze all the documents, to write the plan of what to do with this well, to either rehabilitate it or to increase the flow rate from this well. And we do that for each well. The well stock is about 2,500 in Ukrgassvidobuvanya, and there are 1,500 abandoned. And we work with this stock every day, and in the result of the analysis of geologists, we transfer this to the engineers who design their works, to technical people, but most of that is the work of geologists and physicians and physicists. And here there's a high accuracy 3D seismic data. We do that in the fields which have 50 or 100 BCM of reserves, but they never, but there was never 3D seismic acquired there. I see that new horizons are missed, and there are blocks, even some missed in the horizons which are being developed. I mentioned the intensive work in the fields which are discovered already, but the first slide, which showed about 60 BCM, we will never achieve it till we work in all gas provinces of Ukraine. Ukrzgazwydobywania works in Dnieprodonetsk depression and in the west of Ukraine, and we also planning to go to the Odessa offshore in the Black Sea. This is pink color, that is we submitted the packages of documents for getting special permits to the Geological Survey. Fortunately, when the new head is there, the Geological Survey is now cooperating with us. And we observe the law. We're ready to work in new areas, and legally we are ready to receive the permits. That's the map of them. The map where we are planning to start geological exploration works. And that is what's left from the Black Sea offshore, that's Odessa offshore. We submitted the documents for 5 blocks, each one about 1,000 square kilometers. We're working on that, and the documents are already in the State Geology Survey of Ukraine. For geology exploration works in Ukrzgazwydobywania, the protocol was developed, which we follow. We have this protocol for geology exploration. First thing we do, we'll look for such work, and we are trying to receive all the historic data. And also we are reinterpreting the results of we understand that the technologies which were applied 40 years ago are obsolete, and we now use new technologies to assess the results of different works. We design, we plan abandonment of wells, and based on that we develop the first model, and then we develop some additional works, we plan additional works, and then we look at the assessment of reserves. Such approach allows us to shorten the terms with possible extension up to 10 years. The state gives the right to conduct geological exploration. We shorten this time frame till 2 to 4 years, after which we can get the first product. And the example could be Musienka license. There was one field, one well that was producing, but there were very small reserves. We analyzed this information. We commissioned the reinterpretation and processing of old historic data, and we found a place for drilling in a new block. This is for drilling one prospecting well. We are now assembling the rig there, and in December 2016 we received the special permit. In December of 2017, a year later, we are now planning to drill a new prospective well. Give me an example of any company which within a year would start drilling the first well. No. That is why we will continue to move along that route and introduce this approach, because we are limited in time. Ukraine needs gas today. In time when part of the territory and the whole oil and gas bearing region is inaccessible because of the annexation of Crimea and because of the ATO in the east of Ukraine. Here the new areas, that's where we enhance the volumes of seismic exploration, 2D and 3D. We are planning to do it 5 times more than before, 3,000-4,000 square kilometers. That's where we want to do the 3D seismic acquisition. We need to do 6-7 we need 6-7 crews to work simultaneously on our areas. That's why we organize open tenders, and the colleagues from Belarus Nafta start helping us. They bought some new equipment. Also, we are open for cooperation, and our European, American and Canadian colleagues are open for cooperation, because high quality seismic data means successful drilling of wells. And again, I would like to emphasize all over the world, the seismic data acquisition is the main method. Whatever people say, but working with American and Canadian colleagues and European colleagues, first thing, show us 3D seismic cube. If you have it, we continue discussion with you. If you don't have it, then do it. Because other methods are just adding up, and they allow to reduce risks in interpretation of seismic data. Also, this is important to understand what's the geology, whether these zones are tight or not tight, or whether they're fractured, and so on. And to achieve that, Укргазвидобування, after seismic acquisition, does drilling, and because of the lack of financing, there was a stagnation for many years, for 20 years. There was this stagnation. In 2017 we see the increase of the rates of drilling. 2018 will be significant increase, and in blue, the blue shows the volumes of pilot production drilling, and the exploitation drilling is at the same level until you discover the field. There could be no exploration wells, operational wells. And here's a new picture what's needed to execute the strategy 2020. There are some discovered fields, the fields which are to be discovered. But there's one but. I will request everyone to listen very carefully. One of the directions is the gas and tight sands, where you can see that in middle Carboniferous, the tight sands are more than 50% of the area. There are concentrated oil and gas there, but they didn't consider the condition. But there are technologies which allow to produce them, on the other hand. To find the balance so that the production and work with these collectors is economically feasible, that's important. And there should be state provided by there should be assistance provided by the state to reduce royalty, because additional financial resources are needed. And here I show the figures, what's happening in the world with non-traditional reservoirs. I will not mention the shale gas or shale oil, but we concentrate on tight reservoirs. We have to concentrate our attention on tight reservoirs. There's a certain percentage of porosity which has hydrocarbons in a specific field, but till recently it was impossible to extract that from the horizon. Now there are such technologies, and that's why we include them into our calculations, and we created a working group where we will develop this direction, the gas from tight sandstone.
I also would like to mention, besides tight reservoirs, I would like to mention another possibility to increase production. Maybe my colleagues, geologists present today in this room, might recollect our issue with the increased, with the big depths beyond 7 kilometers and more. Some time ago, I was surprised to hear that near Dolina Shevchenkivska well was additionally drilled, and it allowed geologists to implement to reality the things which were developed long before. There are much discussions about big potential. We should keep in mind additional porosity, tight collectors, properties of the reservoirs, which allow commercially viable projects unlike it was in the past. And I invite all my colleague geologists to come to me. My door is always open for you, both in the East and in the West. We now have teams implementing our projects. We are open to new ideas, and we have financial resources, we have capacity to involve international experience and to implement this program of deep gas here in Ukraine. I would like to finish my presentation with a statement that it's not sufficient to know. It is necessary to apply. It's not sufficient to dream. It's necessary to start to act. And only in this case we'll be able to make Ukraine independent in terms of energy supply.